Malcolm, just
are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Number one, of the black man in America is beyond America's ability to solve. It's a human problem, not an American problem or a Negro problem. And as a human problem or a world problem, we feel that it should be taken out of the jurisdiction of the United States government and the United States courts.
We want freedom by any means necessary. We want justice by any means necessary. We want equality by any means necessary. We don't feel that in 1964, living in a country that is supposedly based upon freedom and supposedly the leader of the free world, we don't think that we should have to sit around and wait for some segregationist congressman and senators and a president from Texas in Washington, D.C. to make up their mind that our people are due now some degree of civil rights. No, we want it now, or we don't think anybody should have it.
Uhuru, welcome to We Charge Colonialism, Black August edition. I am Ikemba Ojore, a community organizer and host of We Charge Colonialism Media. Black August is honored every year to commemorate the fallen freedom fighters of the Black Liberation Movement, to call for the release of political prisoners in the United States, to condemn the oppressive conditions of U.S. prisons, and to emphasize the continued importance of the Black liberation struggle. Observers of Black August commit to higher levels of discipline throughout the month. This can include fasting from food and drink, frequent physical exercise and political study, and engagement in political struggle. In short, the principles of Black August are study, fast, train, and fight. During the COVID shutdown, myself with other organizers launched the first Black August Power Hour study by examining George Jackson's Blood in My Eye. We are reviving the Black August Power Hour study with Brother Malcolm X, and we have reached out to organizers within the Black Liberation Movement to participate. We will be meeting every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time to analyze and discuss the philosophy of Malcolm X. Do join us on YouTube or Facebook for this special commemoration of Black August and Black resistance. Our goal is for organizers within the Black Liberation Movement to unpack Brother Malcolm X's views on colonial capitalism in a contemporary context, to unpack resistance in the movement against colonialism from the lens of Minister Malcolm X. We will be reading select texts and discussing related questions to uplift the historical events that has taken place throughout the month of August. Now, welcome to the Black August Power Hour. Hey, peace to the family. Again, I'm Ikemba Ojore. We Charge Colonialism. I appreciate everybody that's viewing. I want to ask you to like and share and subscribe if this is the first time. Subscribe to the channel if this is your first time being here. So we're continuing. I'm excited to be back. All right. We're continuing the Black Power Hour by examining Malcolm X's There's a Worldwide Revolution going on. There's a link to the text in the chat. If you look in the live chat, you'll be able to read along with us. We will share it on the screen as well. And so, in this particular speech that's given on February the 15th, 1965, days before Malcolm was assassinated, he's speaking about the power structure and the necessity of a worldwide revolution and the role that African Americans or African people in America must play in that revolution. This is given a couple of days after Malcolm's house was firebombed, just to give a little context. And a day after Malcolm was in Detroit, giving one of his most acclaimed speeches, which we know of as the last speech or last message. Malcolm is also going to give another speech, I believe, in Rochester a couple of days after he gave this speech, and he was on an interview on February the 18th. So Malcolm was very busy. On February 21st, he was attending to give the program of the Organization of Afro-American Unity before he was assassinated. So Malcolm was very busy. Was always busy, particularly that last week. And we're going to look at his speech, and I'm going to share my screen. Again, we have organizers who are part of the Black Liberation Movement, that's continuing the work in the spirit of Malcolm X that is with us. And I'm going to pass it over to Tone, who's going to introduce our reader for today.
Peace and good afternoon. Happy Black August.
I got you.
Go ahead.
Just want to make sure everybody's able to hear you. I'm sharing right now. And yeah, go right ahead. And if people in the comments could just let us know if you can hear Tone clearly, I appreciate it. We want to make sure that everyone is able to hear. Go right ahead, Tone.
Peace again, and welcome to the halfway point of our Black August. We will be reading, as Ikemba mentioned, there's a worldwide revolution going on, and we'll have our comrade, Nku Laiko, who will be reading this selection. Please correct your name if I did not say it properly, and you can get started. Can the screen be seen, Ikemba?
The screen, I'm looking, why is it? It's looking a little blurry on my screen for some reason. Yeah, it's looking very blurry. Can some? I'm trying to think if that's a issue. Let me, if y'all can put in the chat. Are y'all able to see the screen, the reading on the screen?
I was able to see it clearly until you took it off.
Yeah, the audio is good. Go ahead. You can go right ahead. We'll wait to see because it could just be on my end. Go right ahead.
There has been a conspiracy across the country on the part of many factions of the press to suppress news that will open the eyes of the Muslims who are following Elijah Muhammad. They continue to make him look like he's a prophet somewhere who's getting some messages direct from God and is untouchable and things of that sort. I'm telling you the truth. But they do know that if something were to happen and all these brothers, their eyes were to come open, that they will be right out here in every one of these civil rights organizations, making these Uncle Tom Negro leaders stand up and fight like men instead of running around here non-violently, acting like women. So they hope Elijah Muhammad remains as he is for a long time because they know that any organization he leads, it would not do anything in the struggle that the black man is confronted within this country. Proof of which, look how violent they can get. They were violent. They've been violent from coast to coast. Muslims in the Muslim movement have been involved in cold, calculated violence. And not at one time have they been involved in any violence against the Ku Klux Klan. They're capable, they're qualified, they're equipped, they know how to do it. Like messing up my vision right now. Okay. They know how to do it, but they'll never do it. Only to another brother. Now I am well aware that I'm well aware of what I'm setting in motion by what I'm saying up here tonight. I'm well aware, but I've never said or done anything in my life that I wasn't prepared to suffer the consequences for. Now, what does this have to do with France, England, the United States? You and I are living at a time when there's a revolution going on, a worldwide revolution. It goes beyond Mississippi. It goes beyond Alabama. It goes beyond Harlem. There's a worldwide revolution going on, and it's in two phases. Number one, what is it revolting against? The power structure. The American power structure? No. The French power structure? No. The English power structure? No. Then what power structure? An international Western power structure. An international power structure consisting of American interests, French interests, English interests, Belgium interests, European interests. These countries that formerly colonized the dark man formed into a giant international combine, a structure, a house that has ruled the world up until now. And in recent times, there has been a revolution taking place in Asia and in Africa, whacking away at the strength or at the foundation of the power structure. Now, the man was shook up enough when Africa was in revolt and when Asia was in revolt. All of this revolt was actually taking place on the outside of his house, on the outside of his base, on the outside of his headquarters. But now he's faced with something new. Just as the French and the British and the French and the British and the Americans formed one huge home or house or power structure, those brothers in Africa and Asia, although they are fighting against it, they also have some brothers on the inside of the house. And as fast as the brothers in Africa and in Asia get strength, begin to rise up, begin to change their image from negative to positive, this African image that has jumped from negative to positive affects the image that the black man in the Western Hemisphere has of himself. Whereas in the West Indies and in Latin America, whereas in the West Indies and in Latin America, countries and in the United States, you or I used to be ashamed of ourselves, used to look down upon ourselves, used to have no tendency whatsoever or desire whatsoever to stick together. As the African nations become independent and mold a new image, a positive image, a militant image, an upright image, an image of a man, not a boy, how has this affected the black man in the Western Hemisphere? It has taken the black man in the Caribbean and given him some pride. It has given pride to the black man in Latin America. It has given pride to the black man right here in the United States. So that when the Black Revolution begins to roll on the African continent, it affects the black man in the United States and affects the relationship between the black man and the white man in the United States. When the black man in the Caribbean sees the brother on the continent of Africa waking up and rising up, the black man in the Caribbean now begins to throw back his shoulders and stick out his chest and stand up. Now, when the black man goes to England, he's right inside English power structure, ready to give it trouble. When the black man from the French,
We're gonna pause here for a second to try to get the feed to not be blurry to the folks on YouTube. So just bear with us. Hang on 1 second.
All right, everyone. So again, we're reading Malcolm X's speech. There's a worldwide revolution going on. Just stopping for a second to see if we can clear, if we can get the reading to show a lot more clear. I know it's coming up blurry for you guys. Let's see if this works. No. This is the first time this has happened. I don't know why it's coming up like this. The Zoom. And it's blurry on Facebook as well, we're being told. Hey, people can hear. This is the best we could do, right? You're resharing it, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. There's even let me see, it might be something I'm doing. All right, it's good now. All right, thank you everyone for bearing with us as we get the screen clear for you all. So it looks very good now.
Okay. Thank you. You can pick up the reading. Thanks so much.
when the black man from the West Indies goes to France, why the effect upon him of the African Revolution is the same as the effect upon us here in the States by the African Revolution. This is what you have to understand. Now, up to now, there have been black people in France divided, black people in England divided, black people here in America divided. What divided us? Our lack of pride, our lack of racial identity, our lack of racial pride, our lack of cultural roots. We had nothing in common. But as the African nation got its independence and changed its image, we became proud of it. And to the same degree that we became proud of it, we began to have something in common to that same degree. So whereas formerly it was difficult to unite black people, today it is easier to unite black people. Well, formerly black people didn't want to come together with black people, but only with white people. Today you find black people want to come together with black people. All they need is someone to start the ball rolling. So this is what you have to understand. And as brothers on the African continent lead the way, it has an effect and an impact on the brothers here and the brothers in the Western Hemisphere. So that when you find the Afro-American community in France uniting not only with itself, but for the first time beginning to unite and work in conjunction with the African community, this frightens the Gould to death because he sees some new problems in front of him. And when the Afro and West Indian community, which is an Afro-American community in England, begins to unite, and they unite also with the African community in England and reach out and get the Asian community, it's trouble for old John Bull. Trouble that he never foresaw before. And this is something that he has to face up to. Likewise, here in America with you and me, for the first time in our history, you find we have a tendency to want to come together. For the first time, we have a tendency to want to work together. And up to now, no organization on the American continent has tried to unite you and me with our brothers and sisters back home. At no time, none of them. Marcus Garvey did. They put him in jail. They framed him. The government framed him and put him in jail. Marcus Garvey tried. The only fear that exists is that you and I, once we get united, will also unite with our brothers and sisters. And since they knew that since they knew that my calling in life as a Muslim, number one, I'm a Muslim, for which I'm proud, and in no way has that changed my being a Muslim. My religion is Islam. What's that? Okay, y'all sit down and be cool. Just sit down and be cool. As a Muslim, when I left the Black Muslim movement, I realized that we taught in there was not authentic Islam. What we taught in there was not authentic Islam. My first journey was to Mecca. My first journey was to Mecca to make myself an authentic Muslim and to bring them there up to date on the problems that our people who are Muslims had. As soon as we established our religious authenticity with the Muslim world, we set up the Organization of Afro-American Unity and took the immediate steps to make certain that we would be in direct contact with our African brothers on the African continent. So the first step that has been taken, brothers and sisters, since Garvey died, to actually establish contact between the 22 million Black Americans with our brothers and sisters back home was done by two organizations. First done by the Muslim Mosque, which gave us direct ties with our brothers and sisters in Asia and Africa who are Muslim, and you know we've got to unite with them because they are 700 million Muslims, and we surely need them. We surely need to stop being in the minority and become part of the majority. So as Muslims, we united with our Muslim brothers and sisters in Asia and Africa, and as members of the Organization of African or Afro-American Unity, we set out on a program to unite our people on this continent with our people on the mother continent. And this frightened many power, many interests of this country. Many people in this country who want to see us the minority and don't want to see us taking too militant or uncompromising a stand are absolutely against the successful regrouping or organizing of any faction in this country. Those whose thinking patterns is international rather than national.
Mm.
Whose thought patterns, whose hopes, whose aspirations are worldly rather than just within the context of the United States border or the borderline of the United States. So this has been the purpose of the OAAU and the Muslim Mosque too, to give us direct link, direct contact, direct communication, and cooperation with our brothers and sisters all over the earth. And once we are successfully uniting ourselves with our people all over the world, it puts us in a position where we no longer are a minority who can be abused and walked upon. We become a part of the majority. And then if this man over here plays too rough, we have some brothers who can play as rough as he. So that's all I have to say about that. I wanted you to know that my house was bombed. It was bombed by the Black Muslim movement upon the orders of Elijah Muhammad. And when the bomb was thrown, one of the bombs was thrown at the rear window of my house where my 3 little baby girls sleep. And I had no compassion or mercy or forgiveness or anything of that sort for anyone who attacks children. If you attack me, that's one thing. I know what to do when you start attacking me. But when you attack sleeping babies, why you are lower than a god. The only thing that I regret in all of this is that 2 black groups have to fight and kill each other off. Elijah Muhammad could stop the whole thing tomorrow just by raising his hand. Really, he could. He could stop the whole thing by raising his hand, but he won't. He doesn't love black people. He doesn't even want to go forward. Proof of which, they're killing each other. They killed one in the Bronx. They shot another one in the Bronx. They tried to get 6 of us Sunday morning. And the pattern has developed across the country. The man has gone insane, absolutely out of his mind. Besides, you can't be 70 years old and surround yourself by a handful of 16, 17, 18-year-old girls and keep your right mind. So from tonight on, there'll be a hot time in the old town. With regret. There's no organization in this country that can do more for the struggling black man than the Black Muslim movement if it wanted to. But it's gotten into the possession of a man who's become senile as old age and perhaps doesn't realize it. And then he has surrounded himself by his children who are now in power and want nothing but luxury and security and comfort and would do anything to safeguard their own interests. So I feel responsible for having played a major role in developing a criminal organization. It was not a criminal organization at the outset. It was an organization that had power, the spiritual power, to reform the criminal. And this is what you have to understand. As long as that strong spiritual power is in the movement, it gave the moral strength to the believer that will enable him to rise above all his negative tendencies. I know because I went into the movement with more negative tendencies. Than anybody in the movement. It was faith in what I was taught and made it possible for me to stop doing anything that I was doing and everything that I was doing. I saw thousands of brothers and sisters come in who were in the same condition. And whatever they were doing, they would stop it overnight. Just through faith and faith alone. By this spiritual force, giving the one giving one the faith that enabled one to exercise some moral discipline. It became an organization that was to be respected as well as feared. But as soon as the faith in the movement, the faith in the minds of the people in the movement was destroyed, now it has become a movement that's organized, but not on a spiritual basis. And because there's no spiritual ingredient within the organization, there's no moral discipline. For it now consists of brothers and sisters who were once well-meaning, but now who do not have the strength to discipline themselves. So they permit themselves to be used as a machine for a man who, as I say, has gone senile and is using them now to commit murder, acts of maiming, and crippling other people. And I know that there's a brother sitting in here right now tonight who was beaten by them a couple of years ago. I'm not going to say. He knows. And if anybody should apologize to him, I should apologize to him. And I do apologize to him because he was beaten by the movement when I was... Because he was... All right. Yeah, he was beaten by the movement when I was in the movement. And I was too far from him when he got beaten. And I wasn't too far from him when he got beaten. But this is what happened, and this is what we have to contend with. I, for one, disassociate myself from the movement completely. And I dedicate myself to the organizing of Black people and to a group that are interested in doing things constructive, not for just one religious segment of the community, but for the entire Black community. This is the purpose of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. I have an action program that's for the good of the entire Black community, and we are for it the betterment of the community by any means necessary. Since tonight we had to get into this old nasty negative subject, we didn't want to bring up our program. We're going to have a rally here this upcoming Sunday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 2 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock, Brother Ruben, right? 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, at which time we will give you the program of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, what our aims are, our objectives are, what our programs are. Whether or not you want to be identified with it and what active part you can play in helping us straighten Harlem out. Nobody's gonna straighten out Harlem but us. Nobody cleans up your house for you. You have to clean it up yourself. It's Harlem, our house. But Harlem is our house. We'll clean it up. But when we clean it up, we'll also control it. We'll control the politics. We'll control the economy. We'll control the school system, and we see that our people get a break. So on that note, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to bring my talk to a close. I'm going to let you have a 5-minute recess, during which time we're going to make up a collection so that we can pay for the expense of the hall, and we'll take a 15-minute question period afterwards. So, Brother James, is everything said? So, Brother Kimba, is everything said? Are we going to have get those questions ready?
We good there? Yeah, we can stop there. Yeah, so appreciate you taking that on. Again, appreciate everybody who's joining us. Continue to like and share, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We just got finished reading an excerpt from Malcolm X's There's a Worldwide Revolution Going On. There was a part in the speech where you was reading, I think we were actually reading a dry run of what would take place a week later or a few days later when Malcolm was assassinated. I don't know if y'all caught that when Malcolm sort of paused and told the crowd to sit down and be cool, right? And I think we was just reading a dry run of what was going to take place a week later. So again, I think this is another, very important speech. Malcolm is talking about the international struggle, and he's talking about bringing Africans together sort of under this one banner. And he talked about Marcus Garvey, and there's not a lot of times that Malcolm had brought up Garvey in his speeches. I think outside of this particular speech, I may have read or heard him mention Garvey and one or once or twice, right? At least from my research. And so here we are at 65, and Malcolm is he's referencing Marcus Garvey and the Garvey movement and what took place and what he tried to do and what the government did to undermine Garvey's attempt to unify African people. And I think Malcolm is bringing that up because this is what he's attempting to do at this point, right? And that's to unify not just African people, but I think oppressed people around the world. With a focus though on bringing the African community or Black community together. So I'm gonna pass it on. We got some questions, so I don't want to take up too much time. I'm going to pass it to Tone. Tone's going to facilitate the discussion with our organizers, and appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you, Nkuleko, for reading. That was excellent. And we'll jump right into the questions. So on page 24 and 25, we hear Malcolm talk about power structure, the American power structure, the French power structure, and so on. What is meant by the power structure? Can someone break that down a little further? And also, how does that power structure look today?
Peace, this is Brother Khalid. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I'll jump in and just make a few comments, and hopefully other people can build upon it, because I certainly don't have a comprehensive definition. But the power structure that Malcolm spoke of exists today. The players are basically the same players. Some have more power now than they had during that particular period of time. But the power structures are aptly described by Malcolm in terms of the banks, the financiers, the multinational corporations, the local politicians, the national politicians, the folks who are the architects behind what we call capitalism nationally and what we call imperialism throughout the world, or colonialism when it comes to folks of color. So that's basically the power structure. But the power structure, again, the players remain the same, but their power may not necessarily be the same as it was 50, 60 years ago. We all recognize, for example, that the major European colonial powers were weakening as a result of the outcome of World War I. And one of those colonial powers was so weakened and so utterly defeated that it gave rise to the National Socialist Party through Hitler, and it reemerged and became another powerful force at the outbreak of World War II. But then again, a major colonial power was weakened at the end of World War II, and that was the British Empire. And so the British Empire was severely weakened, as well as the French colonial structure was severely weakened due to the outcome of World War II, or due to its participation in World War II, to the point where it could no longer maintain the strong foothold it had previously maintained throughout its colonial empires. And then we get the emergence of the United States of America as the dominant worldwide power, having been spared the tremendous destruction, internal destruction during World War II, especially that the other colonial powers had experienced. Infrastructure here in the United States remained basically untouched and almost completely intact, except for the beginning of the bombings in Pearl Harbor. Everybody else, bridges, hospitals, roads, schools, infrastructure, people, civilian and military people at home got bombed to bits. So the United States emerged as a very strong and dominant power throughout the world, later on in competition with the USSR, which also suffered tremendous loss, infrastructure as well as population. Almost 25 million people within the USSR died as a result of fighting in World War II. So the power structure, the players are basically the same with a few exceptions. Basically United States, France, the UK. Belgium is not as much of a power player as it once was. Neither is Portugal. Neither are places like Spain. But so basically, it's the same. And then all the interconnections, financial stuff, International Monetary Funds, World Banks, NATO, the creation of NATO. So that's basically the power structure. But the power structure itself is not unified. They have internal conflicts and they have internal struggles for power. Not necessarily around questions of dismantling an empire, but about who's going to control the empire and what direction the empire should go. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Brother Khalid. I think that was a very clear picture as to the power structure and what it looks like today. I further want to offer Valerie's submission, who says the power structure that Brother Malcolm mentioned is the capitalist, colonialist, imperialist empire, and we are inside of the belly of the beast. She further says, and as Brother Khalid mentions, the same power structure exists today, powerful and continued to be vampires to Black and Brown nations, which is why the question of Black nationalism is so important. Thank you for that, Brother Khalid and Val. Val also adds, we need to identify ourselves as a nation within a nation, a Black nation. Thank you for these submissions.
I hear that.
Does anyone want to offer anything further about on that first question regarding the power structure and how it looks today? And for anyone who wants to offer, please feel free to put yourself on stack or write in the chat if you cannot speak. So we're going to move on to the second question, which I also want to add, which is how was Brother Malcolm shaped by Black nationalism? How specifically can Black nationalism move our community towards freedom? So again, how was Brother Malcolm shaped by Black nationalism? How specifically can Black nationalism move our community towards freedom? And on that, I also want to offer, on page 726, Malcolm describes how it was once difficult to unite Black people, but today it is easier to unite Black people. So you can also offer your thoughts on the ease with which it is to unite. And Kwamba offers, he was also talking about power over the home, our communities. Thank you for that. So again, the second question, how was Brother Malcolm shaped by Black nationalism? How specifically can Black nationalism move our community towards freedom?
This Brother Khalid, I'll jump in quickly again. I think Brother Malcolm was a product of his time. He was a product of his environment, and he was a product of the time that he was born in and the era in which he lived. And so we refer to it as Black nationalism, but in other parts of the world, they refer to it as anti-colonialism, or they refer to it as African nationalism, or they refer to it as Kenyan nationalism, or Kenyan nationhood. But he was a product of that moment. He was a product of those times. Born, I do believe, at the end of World War I, came into his own in that period between World War I and World War II, which really was just a cold period because there remained conflict, especially amongst the European powers, over who would control the peoples of color throughout the world, the Pacific Islands, Central South America, Western Hemisphere, and certainly Africa and Asia. And so even though they were no longer fighting physically, there was the undertone within the contending colonial powers, mostly European with the exception of the Japanese, as to who would control. And Malcolm grew up in that era. And there was an aspiration for freedom. People wanted to be free. People wanted to break away from the yoke of colonialism. So what I contend is that our struggle here within the United States was defined as a civil rights struggle, but in essence, it was an anti-colonial struggle. We called it a civil rights movement, and it came to be defined as a civil rights movement. But when you look at, to use Malcolm's terms, worldwide revolution, at that moment, there was a worldwide revolution going on, pushing back against colonialism and pushing back against imperialism. And we were part of that movement. We just had a different way in which we defined it. And unfortunately for us, because we defined it that way, or we let the powers that be provide their definition for us, we continue to operate within that dysfunctional framework. Today in 2023, we still fight a civil rights movement within the civil rights paradigm instead of a anti-colonial paradigm, instead of a revolutionary Black liberation paradigm. And that's one of the things that always keeps us at risk for being co-opted and for being so easily misled. But yeah, so I think that Black nationalism today can help us, but we got to be very careful about that, because this is not the 1940s, 50s, and early 60s. Black nationalism now disguises itself very easily as neocolonialism. And so we can have a lot of Black and brown people who look like us, walk like us, and talk like us, but whose vested interest is really maintaining white supremacy and economic injustice. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that, Brother Khalid. So we have three people on stack. I'm first going to read what Val offered, and then Kalamba, Raphael, as well as Japan. So first, Val mentioned that in this process, we'll have a cultural revolution as well begin to undo the psychological damage and re-envision who we are and who our enemy is. Also offering, will regain a sense of pride and understand that we are worth fighting for and will win. At this most basic level, this is our road to victory. Also, Malcolm was affected directly by Marcus Garvey because his parents were Garveyites. That is the case, Earl and Louise Little. So Malcolm grew up with the ideas of Garvey. Agreed, it was very much so embedded in him. As we know, his parents were leading parents within the movement as well. Thank you for that, Valerie. We're going to move to Kalamba, and then Raphael, and then
this is Kumba. So can I be heard?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So I'm just thinking about Malcolm's life and what we was reading. So some of the things that influenced his nationalistic tendencies was some of his travels to the continent of Africa. And around this time that he was assassinated, just a year before or so, just around in the time, he had traveled to Africa. He sat down with Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and others. And of course, that's where we know during that time, the Organization of African Unity had formed. Therefore, he modeled the Organization of Afro-American Unity after that. So I think that he was really influenced by the continent of Africa's struggle against anti-colonialism and really moving that struggle forward and looking at some of the leaders that was on the continent and political parties that have been established by said leaders, and seeing how they were forging the struggle there on the ground, and also making that connection to the African masses globally and not just being in isolation. And that's one of the things that trip to Africa did. It broke down that isolation tendencies that you might have seen. But years ago, prior to his assassination, I want to say around 63 or something like that, when they used to do a lot of those speak outs and things of that nature, if you notice those banners in the background, some of those banners in the background would have some of these leaders that we just talked about. And some of the, if I'm not mistaken, I know one of them was one of the printing on the banner was in opposition to colonialism. So I think he had a budding and growing nationalism for a long time, and it just started to hit his apex at that particular time around his assassination with his travels and things to those other countries and the other leaders. And in looking at, where it is today, more or less, I mean, I think we're moving towards African internationalism, whether we know it or not. That is, we say it in different terms, in different ways, but it's really connecting our struggles globally with all African people and making Africa the center point of our discussion. And of course, knowing where we are, we have the African Revolution front, wherever we might be. And once we kind of understand that, I think as a people, we'll probably, hit that mark a lot sooner than later.
Thank you, Kumba. And brother, Kama, you wanted to say something?
Oh no, just uniting. Go ahead.
Right. Brother Khalid just noted that Malcolm X was a Black nationalist long before his trips to Africa. Yeah, and as Val lifted, his parents had those roots as well. Thank you for that, Brother Colin and Val. We're going to move on to Rob and then one.
Thank you, Tom. And in fact, I was going to say most of what Kumba said. I don't think I could have said it that well, though. So thank you for sharing that, Kumba. The only thing I'll add on is based on Peter Goldman's book, The Death and Life of Malcolm X. And I hadn't read a lot about his international experiences, but at least with this one, there were, I think, two things that stood out for me that connects with a lot of what Kumba was saying about Malcolm's extension of Black nationalism, but also, I think, a demonstration of Pan-Africanism. In most of the countries that he visited, Goldman talks very concretely about, I guess, two things importantly. One, how most of the governments, etc., there embraced him as a diplomat of Black nationalism in the U.S. So the same way they would embrace any other leaders from any other countries, they embraced Malcolm with that similar treatment. And I found that really beautiful, especially some of the things he went through in the U.S. But then I think alongside that, he talks too about the sort of level of skepticism that many of the African leaders may have carried in fully embracing and carrying out Malcolm's plan of a united Africa, united internationalism, Pan-African movement. And I think, at least from my understanding, and others may be, have a different record, there seemed to be that same influence of the white imperialist superstructure, capitalist superstructure that we initially was talking about, that kind of had many African leaders on the fence about whether to go full-fledged with Malcolm's ideas or whether or not to take that halfway tree in order to maintain whatever interests or concessions that they were already receiving. So thank you again, Kumba, for sharing what you did.
Thanks for that submission, Rafael. It's appreciated. And last but not least, before we move on to the third question, I'll hear from Jaquan.
Hi, what's up, everybody? Uhuru. The thing that I wanted to add was that Black nationalism is the precursor to African Pan-Africanism. It is the necessary step that you must take in order to get to Pan-Africanism. What I would like to say is that it is through revolutionizing and increasing the consciousness. I'm sorry, my son is in the back. It's through revolutionizing and increasing the consciousness of our people through Black nationalism that will eventually lead to Pan-Africanism, and that's the thing that has to happen before Pan-Africanism is developed in every sense. All of our leaders, when it comes to Malcolm, when it comes to Du Bois, when it comes to all of our leaders that came before us, they all had a necessary precursor, which was understanding the Black plight in America or wherever area they were in. And then it eventually developed into a scientific socialism that we see, what they came to be at the later ends of their days. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you for that, Jaquan. The submissions are appreciated. Just reading some message in the chat. Malcolm X's political trajectory is equal to looks like Muslim nationalism via NOI, Black nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and internationalism. Also, the OAAU was conceptualized and operationalized as a regional Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist organization. It is meant to include not just Blacks within the U.S., but throughout the Western Hemisphere. Thank you for those submissions, Jaquan and Khalid. We are going to move on to
and quickly, just one thing I want to say on Black nationalism too. I think we have to, like, how are we defining Black nationalism as well is important. Marcus Garvey could be considered a Black nationalist, or some Pan-Africanist by others, or some may say that he was African internationalist their time. So I think, like, with Black nationalism, you have people who may be Black internationalists that can be considered. That could be considered Black nationalism, right? In the sense where if we're talking about an African nation and people are working towards the unification of African people, is that Black nationalism? And some people may mean Black nationalism in a very narrow sense. So I think that's an important thing. And so what Malcolm is that, Malcolm began to stop using Black nationalism even towards the end. We had discussions about this before. This is probably a discussion for another time. But he began to talk more about using incrementism and Pan-Africanism as a framework. These were things that he said. So just some things that we should delve into and learn more about. When we talk about Malcolm and Black nationalism, what did that really mean? But that was it.
Thank you for that submission. Khalid also writes that nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and internationalism are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Agreed. Thank you for the submissions on that question. Our next question is what are the similarities between how the French are treating protesters today and how they treated Brother Malcolm? What lessons can be learned through Malcolm's encounter with French authorities? So we know there's massive protests today in France amongst the people. So we're asking about the similarities on how the French are treating those protesters, and then how Malcolm described his treatment with the French, and also what lessons can be learned through Malcolm's encounter with French authorities.
I'll jump in again, if I can, quickly, just to give it at least what I think is some historical context. Keep in mind, when Malcolm made these comments and when he was dealing with the French authorities and with the British authorities as well, we're talking about 20 years after the end of World War II. The French colonial powers have been struggling to maintain their grip and maintain their power throughout Africa and Asia. They were expelled from Vietnam. The U.S. stepped in, and they were struggling throughout the continent of Africa. They're struggling now to maintain some neo-colonial control during the period that Malcolm is interacting with the French authorities. The times have changed, right? So now, literally, as Malcolm said, the chickens coming home to roost. The chickens have came home. Namely, a lot of the people who were former colonial subjects have now reasserted their so-called right, the nationhood, to be recognized as citizens within France. Same thing applies to the UK. So now people who were former colonial subjects, and still are technically, are now flocking back to these countries. They're having problems in their own countries. Economies have been wasted. Economies have been robbed. Political corruption, neo-colonial control, all types of foolishness. So they're finding their way back to the so-called mother countries, European mother countries, not their native indigenous countries, but the European mother countries. And they're coming to France. They're coming to the UK, right? And they're competing with the limited resources that the former colonial powers have. Jobs, they're competing around access. They're demanding civil rights and civil liberties as part of the colonial empire from the past. But the colonial empire is not as empirely as it used to be. So I think when we talk about what's happening now and what was going on during the time that Malcolm spoke, again, we have to look at the context. Things have drastically changed for the European colonial powers, or former colonial powers, over the last several decades. And I'm not sure if Malcolm would have taken the same approach. I'm not sure if his rhetoric would be the same today. if he was still speaking amongst us. I think he definitely would applaud what's going on, with the African and French brothers and sisters there. But I'm not sure if his approach and his analysis would exactly be the same. And I'll stop here.
That's a fair point, Brother Khaled. Thank you for that. To read what Brother Jalil Mutaquem put in the chat, Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz stated that revolutions are made to secure land. And in this regard, we need to view Black nationalism as directly tied to the struggle to secure land. In Black nationhood, there is no Black nationalism absent of Black nationhood. Thank you, Brother Jalil. Agreed. Also, Kumba writes, all colonizers treat the colonized with disdain from the beginning to today. It is a fight for our lives versus the enemy's lives. Thank you for these submissions. And our final question is surrounding not just the experience that Malcolm had during that time of the speech, but also what you may be experiencing today, which is how do we manage adversity and stress within the movement? And what is the significance of Black unity throughout the diaspora?
And could you ask that question one more time?
Sure. How do we manage adversity and stress within the movement? And what is the significance of Black unity throughout the diaspora? Okay, Leko.
Uhuru. I think we manage stress and within the movement and unity through proper discipline and organization, through correct leadership. Through leadership, we are able to bring the contradiction to a political analysis and take a scientific approach towards fixing and addressing the problem. Because the division of labor within the work, all of the areas that we need to carry out the work. If we look at things in a scientific approach and go about it in a disciplined manner, it could share the responsibility amongst the cadre, amongst those that are involved in doing the work, so that we can share the responsibility, and carry the load collectively, so that it doesn't, one person isn't fully carrying the whole burden by themselves. And that speaks to unity. You dig what I'm saying? Umoja ni nguvu, unity is strength. And we see how the unity in Africa is displaying its strength right now with Mali, Burkina Faso, and other courageous forces that are saying standing in unity with the self-determination of Niger and the people in Niger against foreign intervention, whether it's the U.S., whether it's France, just to call for self-determination. And just like Malcolm said in that speech we read, by them unifying it in Africa is giving Black people throughout the diaspora a newfound, giving us a sense of strength and unity as well. And we're seeing our common interests, and we can make parallels to our experience. We're seeing what unifies us. So the walls of division are kind of crumbling down on the empire, and that's the strength. So more people are waking up and being willing, are willing to participate in our worldwide liberation movement, because the state has, we ideologically defeated the movement already. We ideologically defeated the state already. And that's why they responded by killing our leaders, murdering our leaders, imprisoning our leaders, and exiling them. And now, we're rebuilding it. So our unity is important, in that, and it will help manage our stress and all the other contradictions that we face within our community. Because we understand that the primary basis of all of our problems is colonialism. And so once we unite to overthrow the system, this Western power structure, because like Malcolm says, our French thing is not an American thing. It's not it's a Western power structure overall that wants to control the resources and people of the world, and we have to struggle against that, and we will win. We are winning. Uhuru.
Thank you for that. I'll give Rock the last word before we close.
Yeah, thank you, Tone. Just to add on, to what Inkuleko was saying. I think a good way to manage adversity and stress within movement, I'm thinking about something I heard Leonard Peltier say once during the interview, is for us to just really learn and find ways to communicate and talk with each other. At least what that looked like is designating space, time, just to openly talk about adversity, stress within movement. And I think those discourses can be internal, rather than demonstrated to the public. Another thing that I want to add too, and I guess just thinking about the lessons that historical movements have showed us, but finding those times and opportunities just to build community as well. And I do believe that socializing, getting to know people more personally, understanding what people have been through that may have brought them to these spaces. And when I think about that happening historically, perhaps that was the jail that continued people in struggle. And so, those are some things I think about when I think about addressing adversity, stress within movement.
Absolutely. Humanizing ourselves. So Ra writes that stress should be managed with taking breaks when necessary, asking for and lending support. Absolutely important. This can happen in safe spaces, so we can create them as well as build community with our formations and collectives. Excellent points. Thank you so much. We're at time. We're actually a little over time, so we're going to end here. But it's been a great discussion. We really hope that we did this speech justice, and we encourage you to go back and review the speech, as it is quite important. It's there is a worldwide revolution going on. Join us next time on Thursday, where we unpack the Oxford Union debate. And we want to thank everyone here for engaging in our Black August discussion. We honor Black August by fasting, by praying, by training, by communing, and by study, which is what we're doing here. And this session, we're looking at the readings of Malcolm X. So we appreciate all the organizers who are here today and have read and contributed. We appreciate the audience who's reading or paying attention, reading with us and learning with us, and those who will do so in the future. And we welcome you back on Thursday, where we unpack Malcolm's Oxford Union debate. Thanks so much, and go in peace.